Joining me now is Libertarian candidate for governor, Donald Rainwater. Mr. Rainwater, thank you so much for being here with me
Well,
today.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So I want to start with why you want to be governor. This is the second time you've ran on the Libertarian ticket.
Sure, and the reality is I don't know that I would say that I want to be governor. I think it's more appropriate that I say, as an everyday average Hoosier, I look at the people who are running to govern our state, and it concerns me that they don't represent the citizens of the state of Indiana. They represent corporations, special interest groups, two very large political organizations, but they don't seem to focus on the safeguarding of the individual rights of our citizens and the overall well-being of the citizenry as a whole.
Obviously, one big topic of conversation this election cycle is property taxes. What is your plan to lower property taxes, and how will you ensure that Hoosiers get some relief while also making sure that critical government services are still funded?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think it is a question that's on just about every Hoosier's mind, because we have to realize property taxes don't just affect homeowners, they affect renters too, because when a renter pays rent, the property taxes that the landlord is paying are rolled into that rent. So property taxes affect almost every Hoosier. It affects family farmers in a huge way, because not only is their home are they paying property taxes, but also on their agricultural land, and they actually pay a higher tax than they do on their home for their agricultural land as far as percentage goes. So I've said we need to do two things. There are two goals. The first goal is your property taxes should never go up. They should never increase. In my opinion, the use of assessments is a tax on unrealized gains, because somebody arbitrarily is saying, I think your property is worth this. When I went to school, they taught us that the only true value of something is what you pay for it or what someone is paying you for it. So that area in between, that's really arbitrary, and I don't like that. You should know what your property taxes are going to be, and they should always be the same. The second goal is that property taxes have to end. There has to be a time at which you no longer owe property taxes on your property. You have fulfilled your commitment to the social contract, if you will, and because you can't own your property, truly own it, when the government can come along and say, well, you fell behind on your taxes, we're taking your land. That's just wrong. So those are the two goals. And a proposal that I have put out there that meets those two goals is that we set property taxes at 1% of the purchase price of the property for the entire time that you own it, and that it be for a maximum of 7 years. And I base that on the idea that we have a 7% sales tax in Indiana. So if you pay 1% of the purchase price for 7 years, you've basically paid a real estate sales tax, if you will, and now you're done. We don't have to worry about, well, you know, what about veterans? What about senior citizens? What about people with children? I have to say, the idea that somebody would say that it makes sense to restrict the amount that your property taxes will go up, but we're going to give these people with children, their property taxes will only go up 2%, but people without children 3%, I think that is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And so when I heard that the Republican candidate was proposing such a thing, I was appalled. Why are people with children more deserving of a lower rate of increase than people without children. That makes no sense to me. I'm now 61 years old, so I'm, to some people, a senior citizen. Why should I only have my property taxes go up 2% and yours go up 3%? That doesn't make sense to me. Let's do it for everybody the right way, which is your property taxes never go up, and at some point they stop, and you know when that's going to be.
How do you make sure that government services are still funded, like schools, police, and fire, without property taxes eventually, like you're proposing?
Well, so first of all, the real estate community has said that the average home changes hands every 12 years. So if people are paying property taxes for 7 years, they're really only not for 5. Now, we give businesses, most all communities in Indiana, when a business comes to town, they give them a 10-year tax abatement if they ask for it, which means they're not paying their property taxes for the first 10 years they're there, or at least a portion for that time. So I would first say that there's a laundry list of other funding sources for local governments. Property taxes isn't the only source, and therefore we're not talking about eliminating property taxes entirely, and we're not talking about the only funding source. We have tax increment financing all over the state of Indiana, where they take an area and they say, okay, whatever the tax base is today, the property tax base, that's going to keep going to local government, but any new increment that we create is going to go to the Economic Redevelopment Commission, and they're going to get to spend that any way they want. So when I have people say to me, well, how are you going to make sure local governments don't go bankrupt? Well, they just have to adjust. They've got to quit giving corporations all these breaks, and let's balance it out so that local government has what they need. Hoosier citizens get a break on their property taxes, and they get the same kind of consideration that we're giving all these corporations and all these businesses. Because it says we the people, not we the corporations. So all I'm asking, and I think here again, the knee-jerk, oh, you're going to bankrupt local, is just local governments saying we don't want to quit doing what we're doing the way we're doing it. We don't want to be held accountable. We don't want to be more fiscally responsible. We want to keep throwing this money at this economic development stuff, which in my opinion is just crony capitalism.
One of your opponents has released a detailed plan on how to legalize marijuana. It's a topic that's come up at the State House, and bills have been, proposed from both Democrats and Republicans. Do you support the legalization of marijuana, and how would you phase that in Indiana if you do?
So first of all, I completely support the decriminalization and legalization of all forms of cannabis in Indiana. I also believe that, I can say that as the next governor of the state of Indiana, I will work to expunge all of the records of anyone who has been convicted of a nonviolent cannabis-related offense. Once we get things legalized and decriminalized, we should not have people walking around who have that hanging over their head for the rest of their lives. It makes no sense. We have regulations for tobacco. We have regulations for alcohol. We have regulations for prescription narcotics in the state of Indiana. I don't believe we need a lot of additional expensive government bureaucracy, new commissions, new government programs, all built to expand government just to legalize and decriminalize cannabis. I think we can do it within the framework of how we treat tobacco, alcohol, and prescription drugs, and I think we should do it immediately. There's no phased approach. It should have never been criminalized in the first place, and we just need to undo the mistake that was done when it was criminalized.
Do you see it as a way to make up some tax revenue that might be lost with property taxes and some of the other things you've proposed? I know you want to get rid of the state income tax as well.
So I don't. Yes, there's obviously a tax component there because we're taxing tobacco, we're taxing alcohol. But I want to make it clear, in my opinion, the reason that we decriminalize and legalize cannabis is because it was wrong to criminalize it in the first place. It was a violation of people's individual rights to criminalize it in the first place.
I want to switch to a topic that some of my colleagues are working on, and that's DCFS. If you're elected, what would you change at the Indiana Department of Child Services? Would you change leadership, and what kind of leader would you want to run DCFS? And will the agency be a top priority for you if elected?
Well, the division, the Department of Child Services is a mess. That's just plain and simple. When you have children that are spending some of the months overnight in offices instead of having a reasonable living arrangement, that's a problem. We've had, to be honest, I can remember 10, 15 years ago, issues with DCS. It needs a complete overhaul. Yes, I would look for new leadership. I have to be honest, I'm going to look for new leadership for just about every agency within state government. Because not only do we have a lot of issues with DCS, but we have issues with Medicaid. They recently discovered that there had been $724 million of Medicaid overpayment. While we're telling people who have critically ill children that they need to stay home and care for, well, we promised you there'd be money in a program here to help you with that, but we made $1 billion accounting error, so we're going to have to not do what we said we were going to do. That's all. First of all, how anybody can sleep at night knowing that you let somebody overbill you $724 million, and then you turn around and try to shut down a program because you say you made $1 billion math mistake. These things are just, we need a complete overhaul of the state bureaucracy. We need to, there are lots of great state employees. We need to get the people out of the way who are keeping them from doing a great job for the citizens of the state of Indiana. So yes, DCS is a mess. It needs a complete overhaul. And what we need is somebody who understands how to provide the kind of balanced perspective that you need when you are, when your whole reason for being is to protect children, but you also have to protect the rights of the family at the same time. You can't be too heavy-handed and promote an agenda that should be what is in the best interest of the family and every member of the family.
You alluded to my next question in your answer. FSSA has been a huge topic of conversation this entire year. As you mentioned, families with children with critical disabilities, to elderly people not having access to the funds that they need to.
The wait list?
The wait list, yes. What would you do to fix that budget shortfall that led to all of this and to make sure that Indiana's most vulnerable are taken care of?
Well, the first thing I do is go collect all of that overpaid overbilling from what I understand, and I could be mistaken, but they've never gone back and collected that. If you say you're $1 billion short, but you overpaid by 3/4 of a billion, you could solve 3/4 of your problem by just getting the money back you shouldn't have sent out in the first place. Secondly, and a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I think that we need to be serving our citizens before we're giving the Indiana Economic Development Corporation $600 million of new funding or more to go out and bring corporations to Indiana. Most economists will tell you that if you bring people to an area, the jobs follow, not the other way around. It's also important, I think, that we acknowledge that in the state of Indiana, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we have a worker shortage. So for every 100 available jobs, we're missing about 23 people to fill those jobs. Bringing in more high-paying jobs is only going to exacerbate that problem, and what it really does is it puts too much stress on the small business owner, the individual franchisee, the entrepreneur in Indiana, who's trying to staff up a business. And when people take those new high-paying jobs, they're leaving a job somewhere. And if those people can't staff their businesses, that's why in the last 10 years, we've actually had a net loss of small businesses and individual franchisees in the state of Indiana. And it's something we need to put more focus on, and we need to understand that spending all this money to bring these big corporations to Indiana and then turning around and giving them 35 or 50-year sales tax abatements where they don't even have to pay the sales tax on their electric bill for 35 or 50 years, while people are struggling in Indiana to determine how they're going to pay for their mortgage or their rent, their grocery bill, their gasoline, put clothes on their kids' backs, buy school supplies to send them to school. But we're giving all these big tax breaks to these big corporations while Hoosier citizens are suffering. And I apologize, I know that's a long answer.
It's okay.
But one of the things that we have to realize is that almost none of these issues are in a silo. And there are no simple answers. And when the Republican or Democrat gives these simple answers, or they roll out these little sheets of paper with, here's my plan on it, it's all smoke and mirrors. The reality is that all of this stuff is interconnected, and we've really got to get in and start untangling the ball of twine, if you will.
It's a good reference. Well, your opponents have also released education plans. What is your education plan, and do you feel that if your education plan were to be put forward, that you would be able to increase outcomes in the state of Indiana?
Well, so let me first of all clarify that last phrase that you used there.
Okay.
Every child in the state of Indiana is unique. They have unique interests, they have unique abilities, aptitudes, and they each have a unique outcome that is unique to them. And we need to stop thinking that 150 elected officials down at the General Assembly knows best what the one-size-fits-all outcome for education should be in Indiana. My plan is to try to give education back to the parents and the teachers and the children and get it out of 200 West Washington Street. We have too much centralized planning going on in our government. I was taught in public schools and private schools in Indiana as a kid that monopolies are bad, because a monopoly drives down quality and drives up cost. Well, there's no bigger monopoly in the state of Indiana than our public education system. And so until we flatten out the bureaucracy, until we make sure, when they say that we're spending 50% of our state budget on education, and we know that the vast majority of that money is not getting to the classroom, we have a serious problem. Because what I hear from both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, is we need to invest more money in education. If I have a beat up old broken down car that won't start and can't get me to work, I don't need to put more money into that old beat up car. I need to think about getting a new car. And while common schools were a great concept in 1837, we can see that we've got a lot of problems in our public education system in the state of Indiana, and we need to rethink this from the ground up. I don't have all the answers, but I think what we need to do is we need to create a more free market environment for education in Indiana, so that parents and their children have options, which will make everybody work a little harder to provide better education, which I believe will create better outcomes.
How do you make sure there's not winners and losers in that situation?
Well, first of all, there are winners and losers in the current situation, without a doubt. And the reality is that we can't guarantee that there won't be winners and losers, but what we can do is that we can guarantee that the government isn't picking the winners and losers. We can guarantee that there's a free market education system that allows for quality education to flourish and bad education to go by the wayside. Now, how we do that, here again, I think we need to have everybody's participation in discussing what's the right way to do that. But using terms like public money should only go to public schools, I don't believe there is anything called public money. It's the citizens' money. They earned it. They paid it in taxes. And since we're all citizens, we should all have a voice and a hand in how we redesign public education and private education to provide the most opportunity for everybody.
Access to IVF and abortion have become national topics of conversation, but we know that we've seen those topics brought up at state legislatures across the state and across the country, including here. Do you support access to abortion, and would you entertain any sort of bill at the State House that could potentially not allow people to have access to IVF?
So, first of all, I'm a pro-life libertarian. I believe that the current law, if the citizens of the state of Indiana believe that there need to be changes, they need to contact their legislators and make sure that their legislators know that they want changes. I understand that a lot of people have concerns about IVF, but I also know that if it is done thoughtfully and carefully, it is a valuable tool for parents or for people who want to be parents. And so therefore, I would not support a bill that eliminated IVF. But here again, I believe we need to make sure that it is done carefully and responsibly.
Would you support ballot initiatives in Indiana?
Oh, I've always supported ballot initiatives. I believe we should have ballot initiatives. I believe that we should have school funding related referendums. I believe that we should have recall in the state of Indiana. If we elect somebody and they promise a chicken in every pot, and come to find out, not only do they not give you the chicken, but they take your pot, I think you should be able to recall that elected official. And I think we need to do that sooner rather than later.
So you would support a ballot initiative asking Hoosiers if they believe women should have access to abortion?
I would support a ballot initiative that was anything that Hoosiers wanted to put on the ballot.
Final question. What's your closing statement to Hoosiers as to why they should elect you as the next governor of the state?
Well, there may be three of us running for governor, but there are really only two perspectives. There's the big government perspective of the Republicans and the Democrats, the folks that want to take more and more of our money and spend it on things that don't directly benefit us. And then there's the libertarian perspective. There's the average everyday Hoosier who's sick and tired of seeing the government take from us and not really give anything back to us, the average everyday Hoosier. And I want to do something about that. And if, I've fought through financial issues, family issues, career issues. I've fought to rebuild my life in a way that I'm very proud of. It is a wonderful thing to know that if you qualify per the Constitution of the state of Indiana, which says you have to be 30 years old and a resident for 5 years to get on the ballot for governor, that you can get on the ballot for governor. We need to preserve the rights of the everyday average Hoosier in this state. And I believe that I'm the only one of the three that really is focused on doing that.
Candidate for Governor Donald Rainwater, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.